Let's get started with the episode. We're back to recap the Chinese Grand Prix that took place this past weekend. Another exciting race and a pretty busy weekend on the whole. We got so much racing this past weekend between the sprint race, the Grand Prix, and then we also had the first F1 Academy race of the year. So we have a lot to go through today. Hi, welcome back to the Grid Girls Formula, your F1 podcast where we unpack what makes Formula One so interesting, from the technical details and strategy to the people, decisions, and stories behind the races. If you aren't already, make sure to like, subscribe, follow us, give us a follow on Spotify, rating, all of that fun stuff, and also follow us at Grid Girls Formula on Instagram and Threads for even more Formula One content. With that, let's hop into the episode. Having the second race of the year be a sprint weekend, I think probably added so much extra stress to everybody's plates, because when there's a sprint weekend, there's so much less time to practice before you're actually like competing against everybody else. So in a typical weekend format, we usually have 3 practice sessions, qualifying, and then the race. But what happens during a sprint weekend is we wind up having 1 practice session, sprint qualifying, the sprint race, and then qualifying, and then the actual race. So there's not a lot of time for the cars to kind of get set up and organized, and with the new regulations especially, I think that we saw the effects of that more so in the race than in the sprint race, I think, which I was pretty surprised about. I feel like a lot of the cars were able to get out for the sprint, but we had a lot of trouble in the actual race. After sprint qualifying, we had the Mercedes on the front row. I don't think anybody is surprised by that at all. What was surprising actually during SQ2 is it almost looked like the Racing Bulls had the chance to potentially knock out the Red Bulls, which I thought was kind of crazy. Max did not have his best weekend. I think this was a really tough one for him. Williams, Aston Martin, and Cadillac were all out in SQ1 and also in actual qualifying as well. They are definitely our low runners for the weekend, which is disappointing, I would say, primarily from the Williams perspective, because I think that they're one of those teams that kind of said that they were going to be putting all of their eggs in the 2026 basket. They were focusing so much on the 2026 regulations, and so I think everybody was expecting them to be a lot better coming into the year. And also they're using a Mercedes power unit, and Mercedes are doing great. So it's always like a little bit harder for the like customer teams to adjust to the new power units compared to like the works teams. Like, it is assumed that the works team will get a bit more of an advantage because they're actually lockstep in with the power unit and they know a lot more about it a lot sooner. So whereas the customer teams have to kind of get used to that as they go along. But honestly, that car just seems really heavy. That's what the commentators keep saying, is it seems like it's way above the weight limit. So I don't even know if there's as much of a power unit issue, as it just seems like the whole car is just not to the standard that everybody was expecting this year, which is so disappointing. However, when you're at the bottom, that does mean that there is always room for improvement, and they are going to be developing that car in leaps and bounds, I'm sure, as the season goes on. The opening laps of both of these races were just like so exciting, mostly because it was like, oh, the Ferrari's gonna get ahead, because those Ferraris are just rocket ships this year. It's amazing to see, and I'm obsessed with the racing between Hamilton and Leclerc. They're about to give me a heart attack, but it looks so much fun. And so anyway, first lap of the sprint race, Hamilton got ahead right away, but he couldn't quite hold it. Antonelli, unfortunately, didn't have a great start and he fell back. He actually had a little moment where he had contact with Hadjar and wound up getting a 10-second penalty for that. But the Ferraris really took advantage of their quick starts, but I think Hamilton went a little bit aggressive on the opening in his battles with Russell and even a little bit Leclerc too, and kind of destroyed his front tires, which is a pretty common occurrence at this particular track. Towards the end of the sprint, Hülkenberg actually had to stop in the middle of the track, and so it brought out a safety car. So everybody came in for tires, which is pretty unusual for a sprint race. Like, typically with the sprint, there isn't any pit stops to be had, but because it was going to have a restart, everybody came in to get new tires, including the Ferraris. They learned their lesson from last week and they came in and pitted, which I was like, good for you. I do think that the Red Bulls may have lost out a little bit in their decision to come in, because it seemed like mostly the people coming in were like the front runners, whereas like the middle of the field didn't come in so much. And so when Red Bull came in, they were running more along like by all of those like midfield teams. teams, so they had a lot more like traffic to get through. So I don't really feel like it was maybe the best decision for them, but it was definitely imperative that like the front runners, that the Ferraris, Mercedes, that they came in order to be competitive on the restart. It also definitely helped Antonelli a little bit that this happened, because he was able to come in and take his penalty during the safety car, so it wasn't near as much of an impact as it would have been had the safety car not been out. There was a little bit of an incident as well, actually. On the restart, Antonelli said that Piastri like overtook him before the start line, so like before it was legally allowed, and so it like kind of took a while, but they eventually made Piastri swap places back with Antonelli, and so he gave a position back. End results from the sprint race wound up being George Russell on the podium along with Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton. I love some Ferrari red on the podium, always exciting. Bearman also had such a strong weekend. He was up there fighting the whole time. He came in 8th during the sprint, but I also think that his performance in the race was really, really good. He wound up coming in 5th. Like, what do you mean we're seeing a Haas in 5th? Like, that's insane to me. So let's hop into the race. So Williams looked like they might be able to scrape by and get into Q2 this round. They were looking a little bit better than they did in the sprint qualifying, but still not quite good enough. There was a pretty decent sized gap, I felt like, between Sainz and Albon. It was like a good solid like 4/10. And it did look like Sainz had a shot, but he couldn't quite do it, unfortunately. Cadillac, on the other hand, might have been relatively happy because Stroll actually qualified in a lower position than Bottas did. So Bottas was 20th, 21 was Stroll, and then 22 was Perez. And I think that for Cadillac, for a new team, they're going to be really, really happy with that result, because that is progress for them. They wanted to make sure that they were competing against somebody, and granted, the Aston Martins are not looking all that wonderful this year, but for Cadillac, that's a competitor, and that is their first competitor in their long line of competitors to come. And so I think for them that was a really, really cool accomplishment, I'm sure. Especially because Aston Martin is like a pretty well developed team. Like, I know they're going through a pretty big development cycle and changes and everything right now, which is why they are struggling so much, because they're, you know, dealing with a lot of new situations along with everybody else. But Cadillac doesn't even have any experience. Like, at least Aston Martin has experience, and Aston Martin is Adrian Newey. So, you know, I'd say qualifying in front of a team that Adrian Newey is on is a pretty good benchmark for Cadillac. Unfortunately, during qualifying, Bortoleto had a spin towards the end of Q2, and so it kind of caused a little bit of havoc for a few people who were doing their last flying lap, because once the yellow flag comes out, they had to obviously slow down. So unfortunately, I feel like there wasn't a lot of opportunity for some of the people who were in those bottom positions to move their way up, but that's just the way it goes sometimes. Russell also stopped randomly on the track during qualifying during Q3. He was literally just like around the corner, and he was like sitting there. He's like, there's a problem with the engine, and the engineer was like, no, it seems fine. He's like, no, it's not. And they were able to give him the direction so that he could keep going and they could sort it out. But it was interesting to see Mercedes kind of have a reliability issue like that, because it just seems like so far they've been so dominant that it's interesting to see if this is going to be something that comes up again, because obviously for this time it was a decent timing on it. It was during qualifying, he had time to go fix it and then come back out and set a lap, and it didn't really affect him. But what if something like that happens during the race? That could really add some interest to the season. So it definitely got me thinking and wondering what's going to happen for the rest of the season for them. Antonelli, though, is the star of the day. Really, I think Antonelli is the star of the weekend. The way the whole weekend went down, because he set an amazing lap time and nobody could beat him, so he became the new record holder for the youngest pole sitter, which is amazing, and that's so exciting for him. He beat Sebastian Vettel, who had the record previously. He set that at the 2008 Italian Grand Prix when he was 21 years old and 2 months. Antonelli became the youngest pole sitter by being 19 years old, 6 months, and 17 days. And really, like, Antonelli just went on to have the most amazing race. He had complete control over that race. We'll get into it a little bit more, but just such a huge day for him to go on and win that race. Like, anytime that you see somebody win a race for the very first time, it's just so exciting because the emotions are so high. Like, I feel like we get to a point sometimes where they get so used to it that it's still exciting for them, but they don't have that same celebration. Like to see like Antonelli like run to his team and give them all a hug, to have his dad gave like an interview after the fact, and it was just so like heartwarming to see. And obviously like Lewis on the podium too. I'm getting way ahead of myself, but like it really was such a sweet moment to see Russell, Antonelli, Bono, who used to be Lewis Hamilton's race engineer but is now Kimi Antonelli's race engineer, and then Lewis Hamilton on the podium. Lewis's first podium for Ferrari. I was like getting emotional. I was like, this is so like just sweet. Like it's just like such like a full circle moment. Everyone was so excited for Kimi. I love when the day ends and everybody is in a good mood and it's just like an exciting race because it's good and happy. And I don't think everybody was McLaren, but for any Ferrari fan or Mercedes fan, I think it was a pretty good day. But yes, we do have to touch for a moment on the McLarens because our currently reigning constructors and drivers world champions are they had a tough weekend, I would say. Apparently, both of the McLarens had completely separate issues, unrelated. They weren't the same, and it was just really unfortunate timing that they both got them. I think they both had to do with the power unit, and they just couldn't work it out in time. So they had originally pushed Oscar Piastri out onto the grid. He was there, he was ready to go, and then they realized this issue, and so he had to bring him back. Norris didn't even get out of the pit, and that's just what we have to deal with at the beginning of a regulations cycle. Like I was kind of mentioning before, these teams that are customers of the power units just don't have quite the same breadth of experience to be able to maximize the power unit, and they're having to sort out all of these problems for the first time, which I suspect is probably what happened to McLaren. They just didn't have enough time to be able to sort out whatever the issue was. I really feel for Oscar Piastri because I really like him and I think he's a really, really good driver, and I just feel like it's gotta suck so much to have the first two races of the season go the way that they did, where he literally hasn't even been able to start. So I hope that he'll be back soon at the next Grand Prix. Alex Albon and Gabriel Bortoleto also did not start the race due to various engine issues. Again, those reliability issues, trying to work out the kinks, is very common at this point in the season. It was another pretty exciting opening lap for the race, just to rewind a little bit because I got caught up in the day itself. Ferrari's, again, quick off the line, but I think Antonelli had a much, much better start during the race than he did during sprint qualifying, so he was able to stay pretty close up there with the Ferraris. Hamilton was able to get in front of him, but then they did have a little fight, and Antonelli was able to take the lead. And once Antonelli was in the lead, like, he really just kind of took this race and had control of it for the rest of the time. Also on the opening lap, there was a very close interaction between Oliver Bearman and Isaac Hadjar. Hadjar spun like right in front of Ollie Bearman, and when I tell you, I think Ollie Bearman was like millimeters from crashing into him. It was such a great maneuver from Ollie Bearman. Like, he was just out of that way. His reflexes, very, very good. They had a good check there. Verstappen again had a horrible start, unfortunately, lost like 6 places. It's literally crazy to watch because he's sitting there trying to go and he's going so slow and all of these cars are just passing him. Unfortunately, he did not have a very good day in any way, shape or form because he had to retire the car as well due to an issue. The Cadillacs actually did hit each other on the start as well, so I'm curious how the team handled that. It's definitely not what you would expect from 2 very experienced drivers at the back of the grid, but I think it was just in the chaos of the moment. Like I mentioned before, there were so many good fights between the 2 Ferraris. I think it's been exciting because the Ferraris are so evenly matched that they are just fighting it out the whole time, and I wish it was like between the Mercedes and the Ferraris as well. Like, it is a little bit at the beginning, but then I just feel like the Ferraris stay together the whole time, which results in like all of these different fights throughout the race. And I had a great time watching it. It sounded like Leclerc and Hamilton both had a great time. Leclerc literally came on the radio and was like, oh, this is actually a pretty good battle. And then Hamilton's reaction at the end was like, this is one of the best races ever. And it was just good to see them happy, and it got my heart pumping at least. There was also a little bit of contact towards the end of the race between Ocon and Colapinto. I think Ocon had just come out of the pits, and I don't think Colapinto really saw him, and when they went to go turn into the corner, unfortunately, Ocon kind of went more or less straight into Colapinto, and they both had a little spin. Luckily, they were able to finish the race. Nothing crazy, but Colapinto was having a really good race, so it kind of sucks that happened and took some time out from him. But again, we had Kimi Antonelli on top, followed by George Russell, and then Lewis Hamilton. When they called Kimi Antonelli's name, though, to come out for the podium, the announcer said Kimi Räikkönen. So I guess he was just really in the moment and forgot what year we're in. But that was kind of funny, and Kimi was like, what? But luckily, I mean, I don't think anything could have taken away from the excitement of that moment for him. Like I said, it was just a precious podium, really. I also wanted to note that Ollie Bearman, like I said, had a great weekend, finished in 5th. Gasly also finished in 6th. To see the Alpines and the Haas like doing better than, I know the McLarens didn't start. I know that Verstappen had to retire the car. They were still better than Hadjar. And I'm like, what? What is going on with these cars? I think it'll be an exciting battle to watch throughout the season. Whether Haas or Alpine like manage to get up on the podium, I don't think it's that far-fetched. I think it's actually very likely that we see one of them on the podium this year if they're running right now 5th or 6th. Granted, again, I know that we didn't have some cars starting, but that could totally happen again. Like, there's so many reliability issues. It's really a lot of luck of the draw right now. I think one of the big questions after the race was, are we considering Kimi Antonelli to be the world champion this year? I personally think that it is not out of the question, but I do think that Russell is the stronger driver still. I think that Antonelli has a lot to learn. And I think that that's kind of the general feel of a lot of people on the grid, is that is the case. But on the whole, like, he's such a quick driver. I definitely don't think we can count him out of the running by any means. I think we just need a little bit more time to see how much he really picked up last year, and the development between year 1 and year 2 can be drastic. We've seen that before, and I'm very curious as to whether he picked up enough last year, if this is still going to be a bit more of a development year for him. I remember last year he had, I felt like a really good first half of the season, and then had a few little speed bumps in the middle, and then got back to being pretty good performance-wise. And so I don't know if he's ready to take on like the pressures of a potential world championship. I would like to think that he is, but the reality of it so far doesn't suggest that. But he's so young, he's got so much time. I think he's very likely to get a world championship one day, if not this year. But again, early in the season, who knows, anything could happen. Okay, now let's move on to talking about F1 Academy. I really enjoy the F1 Academy races. I just feel like it's a very different scrappiness to them compared to like the F1 races. A lot of them are a lot younger. Just as a refresher for F1 Academy, it is made to be a development series, so it's for women. I believe it's like ages 16 to 25, and they can only do 2 seasons of it, and it's meant to give them the opportunity to interact in a Formula setting, give them a pipeline to progress on to other series such as Formula 3, to hopefully one day Formula 1, but it's all women focused, and to give them that spotlight and that development focused on them, and increasing the women in motorsports. So they are younger, they're not as experienced, and that results in a very different driving style a lot of the time, and I often find that the F1 Academy races can be pretty chaotic. I actually thought this weekend was relatively chill for them. I think that the second race was a little bit more scrappy and a little bit more dramatic and more along the lines that I would expect, whereas I feel like the first race was like really well developed racing from a lot of them. Like, there were some moments that definitely I feel like if I'd watched it last year, there were people who probably would have wound up spinning or hitting each other or whatever, and I feel like they kept it really nice and clean, and it made for a really exciting race. So the first race, they do a free practice, and then they do qualifying, and the qualifying sets the grid for race 2. For race 1, they actually do a reverse grid for the top 8 qualifiers, so it's not for as many points as the second race, but it is still worth something. So starting off, there was a fun little moment in the first race between Alicia Palmowski and Alba Lawson. Both of them are definitely potential candidates for the championship this year. They were both in F1 Academy last year, so they're in their second season. They're a little bit more experienced, and they were both forerunners last year. They both did a great job. You could see their potential, and you can see that they're going to be good once they get the season going. Unfortunately, Alba had a slight bit of contact and lost her front wing. It was probably her fault. She was kind of braking really late into a corner, and there just wasn't a gap there, and I think that she thought that it would be. So it's definitely a learning moment for her, and that's what F1 Academy is all about. But there was a yellow flag because of the debris, but they didn't bring her in right away. I think they were kind of hoping that it wouldn't be that bad, but she lost a lot of grip, and that is just what happens because you don't have that downforce on the front of the car, so the whole balance is really messed up. And so she didn't have that, and they didn't bring her in, and so unfortunately she just kept dropping places. So not her race. Nina Gademan was our winner for the first race, and she did a great job. She was out there in front. She was full steam ahead basically the whole time. There were really no issues. She did a phenomenal job of just keeping control of the race. Like I said, there was a lot of really clean racing between Billard, Dobson, and Robinson. They all went 3 wide into a corner in a moment that really I would typically have expected from F1 Academy there to be a little bit more of contact being made, but they kept it really clean and exciting. It was who is going to be in front for this, and I thought they did a great job. There was a pretty exciting battle as well between Felbermeyer and Ferrara. Ferrara was running in third, but Felbermeyer was able to overtake her. Our top 3 for race number 1 wound up being Nina Gademan, Natalia Granada, and Emma Felbermeyer. Which Emma and Nina are both veterans. They were both in F1 Academy last year, but Natalia, this was her first year. This is her rookie season, and I thought that she did a great job. She is actually driving the Sephora car, which is so exciting. I love the way that the partnerships work. So every single F1 team has to sponsor a driver in F1 Academy, but then they also have commercial sponsors, which is just so fun. There's a Puma car, Lego, Sephora. Last year there was Charlotte Tilbury, Amex. It's really exciting for them to get that kind of exposure as well and work with the different teams involved in that. But Natalia drove it great, and it was so exciting to see her up there in second place and get her first podium at her first race in F1 Academy. Race 2 looked like we were going to have Alba. I really wanted Alba to win. She's also the Ferrari back driver, so of course I'm going to want her to win. I am a little bit biased towards Ferrari, but I also just think she's a great driver in general. She had a great start. Felbermeyer was definitely running. They were having a little scrabble and fight. Alicia was fighting with Peyton Westcott, who is the Mercedes back driver. Alicia is backed by Red Bull. Natalia, unfortunately, after her great first race, she had a moment very similar to Alba in the first race, and she lost her front wing and it got stuck under the car, which is obviously less than ideal. There was a great move pulled by Ella Lloyd. She managed to overtake both Ferrara and Billard basically in one fell swoop. They were fighting it out for a position, and she was able to just kind of come right around them and be like, hey guys, bye guys. Alba Lawson looked like she was running away with it, especially because Felbermeyer and Palmowski and Westcott were all kind of fighting it out behind her, so they were just way little specks in her rear view mirror until there was some contact between Esme Kosterman and Jay Jacquet. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce her name, but Jacquet basically went right into the back of Kosterman, unfortunately, and she probably just mistimed the braking a little bit. Again, it's a learning experience. Pretty common in F1 Academy for that kind of thing to happen, but the restart unfortunately did not go Alba's way, and she just misjudged it a little bit, and she just went straight off the track. She just didn't have the traction. She oversteered the car, and so she lost a whole bunch of places because of that. It was pretty disappointing to see that, but Felbermeyer took full advantage of it. She was able to hang on to the lead, and it was the first time that she has won a race. She has won when it has been the reverse grid order, but this is the first time that she's won a full race. So our top 3 during race number 2 was Emma Felbermeyer, Alicia Palmowski, and Peyton Westcott. Felbenmeyer is backed by Audi, so it was actually Audi's first win, which is pretty exciting for them. That was everything for today's episode. I hope that you enjoyed. If you did, again, make sure to like, subscribe, follow us on Spotify, follow us on Apple Podcasts, and make sure to follow us as well on Instagram and Threads so that we can chat and talk all things Formula One at Great Girls Formula. And I'll see you next time. Bye.